In our society, few crimes are as heinous and heart-wrenching as those involving the loss of innocent lives. Today, we will delve into the stories of baby killers who face the full weight of justice in the courtroom. These are not easy stories to hear. 1. Christina Marie Riggs. The first baby killer on this list is a mother of two, Christina Marie Riggs. On November 4, 1997, police in Sherwood, Arkansas, received a distress call from a woman concerned about her daughter, Christina Riggs, and her two grandchildren. The police quickly responded and discovered a devastating scene. Two children, 5 years old Justin Dalton Thomas and 2 years old Shelby Alexis Riggs, were found dead in the apartment, while Christina, their mother, was unconscious but still alive. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Inside the apartment, the police found a suicide note addressed to Christina's mother. In the note, Christina expressed fear that her children, who had different fathers, would be separated if she were no longer alive. She also stated her desire for her children to grow up without knowing she had taken her own life. It became apparent that this was an attempted murder-suicide. Although Christina survived the suicide attempt, she was charged with 2 counts of murder. The bodies of Justin and Shelby were sent for a medical examination to determine the cause of death. The initial investigation revealed no signs of external trauma. The children appeared to be peacefully asleep. The shocking murders deeply affected the small community of Sherwood, as it was the first homicide in a while. Christina's family struggled to comprehend her actions, believing they did not align with her usual personality. A few weeks later, the cause of death for Justin and Shelby was determined. Justin had died from a combination of a drug overdose and smothering, while Shelby had been smothered to death. As Christina had worked as a nurse, the police discovered 3 syringes containing morphine and potassium chloride on the nightstand near the bed. Christina underwent a psychological examination to assess her fitness to stand trial. She claimed to have developed post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, following her involvement in providing medical assistance to the victims of the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. However, her former workplace contradicted her account, stating that she was off duty on the day of the bombing. The hospital confirmed that she had been paid overtime for assisting workers at another hospital. Medical examiners determined that Christina was mentally capable of understanding her actions and participating in her defense. Consequently, she was ordered to stand trial for the murders, with prosecutors seeking the death penalty. During the trial, Christina's defense did not dispute her responsibility for killing her children. Instead, they presented the argument that acute depression led her to believe it was in the children's best interest to end their lives alongside hers. The defense also highlighted the impact of years of sexual abuse during Christina's childhood, a family history of depression, and the lack of emotional and financial support from the fathers of Justin and Shelby. In response, the prosecution depicted Christina injecting Justin and subsequently smothering both children with pillows. They claimed that Christina had displayed a deep hatred toward her son and had neglected her children to engage in social activities such as karaoke. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury found Christina Marie Riggs guilty of murdering Justin and Shelby. During the penalty phase, Christina surprised everyone by expressing her desire for the death penalty and wanting to be with her children. The jury granted her request, and she was sentenced to death. On April 30, 2000, Christina's death sentence was carried out. Before her execution, she expressed deep remorse, acknowledging the pain she had caused and the impossibility of making amends. Ironically, she was executed using potassium chloride, the same drug she had used to end her son's life. 2. Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden. The second entry on this list is the murder of Finley Bowden by his parents, Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden. On Christmas Day in 2020, paramedics were called to the couple's home in Old Whittington, where 10-month-old Finley had experienced a cardiac arrest. Despite efforts to save him, Finley was pronounced dead at the hospital. The court learned that his injuries included 57 bone fractures, 71 bruises, and burns on his left hand. These injuries were inflicted over a period between 4 and the 22nd of December and were described as savage and prolonged with a sadistic motivation. The fractures to Finley's bones caused severe infections, including pneumonia and sepsis, which ultimately led to his untimely demise. Additionally, toxicology tests revealed the presence of cannabis in his blood, suggesting that he had been exposed to smoke shortly before his death. It became apparent during the trial that Bowden and Marsden intentionally prevented professionals from seeing Finley, canceling appointments, and providing false information about his health. Finley's daily life was marked by immense pain, distress, and suffering due to his injuries. He was unable to eat properly, resulting in significant weight loss. The court learned he was forced to sleep in bedding stained with blood and vomit. The judge described the defendants as a accomplished liars who showed no remorse and refused to accept responsibility for their actions. The injuries inflicted on Finley required significant force and hindered his ability to breathe properly. As a result, he endured constant pain and could not enjoy basic activities or even feed properly. The judge emphasized that the multitude of injuries could only have been inflicted by both defendants working together. The couple were sentenced to life in prison for the murder of their 10-month-old son, Finley Bowden.
Weighing up these factors, the minimum term in your case, Stephen Bowden, will be 29 years. The minimum term in your case, Shannon Marsden, will be 27 years.
The sentencing took place at Derby Crown Court, where they were ordered to serve a minimum of 29 and 27 years, respectively. The court revealed that Finley suffered 130 appalling injuries at the hands of his parents. Detective Inspector Steve Shaw from Derbyshire Police expressed his shock and disbelief at the incomprehensible nature of the crime committed by the couple. He highlighted their lack of remorse and unwillingness to acknowledge their wrongdoing. Currently, a child safeguarding review is underway to thoroughly investigate the circumstances surrounding Finley's death. The case revealed that social workers had initially decided to remove Finley from his parents' care due to concerns of significant harm. However, Bowden and Marsden deceived the social workers, and with the support of COVID-19 restrictions, they managed to convince the authorities that positive changes had been made. Consequently, Finley was returned to their care, leading to the tragic outcome. The judgment made by the magistrates, with the guidance of a guardian appointed to represent Finley's best interests, supported a transition plan for his return to his parents. While there is no indication of any legal mistakes, a comprehensive review is being conducted to examine the role of all agencies involved in Finley's case. 3. Janine Jones. Janine Ann Jones is the third baby killer on this list. Janine Jones, known as the Angel of Death, is a convicted serial killer who was found guilty of murdering and attempting to murder several children while working as a pediatric nurse in Texas. Although she was officially convicted for only one murder and one attempted murder, evidence suggests that she may have been responsible for the deaths of many more children. During her employment as a licensed vocational nurse in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, ICU, of Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, from early 1981 to March 1982, an alarming number of children died under suspicious circumstances, most of them under Jones's care. This pattern of mysterious deaths gained attention, and her shift became known as the death shift due to the high mortality rate during her 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. working hours. Children under her care experienced sudden respiratory distress, seizures, cardiac arrests, and uncontrolled bleeding when administered injections. Despite suspicions among ICU doctors, the hospital, concerned about negative publicity, chose not to terminate Jones or involve the police. Instead, during a name change and publicity overhaul, the hospital discharged all licensed vocational nurses, including Jones, without explicitly holding her accountable for the deaths. Jones left the hospital, and the deaths abruptly ceased. An internal inquiry later confirmed that at least 10 children had died while Jones was working, although the report stated that a definitive association between Jones and the deaths could not be established. Jones quickly found another position at a pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas, thanks to positive references. However, similar incidents of mysterious illnesses and deaths occurred at this new clinic. The case that prosecutors definitively linked to Jones involved the death of 15-month-old Chelsea McLennan, who received multiple injections of a muscle relaxant administered by Jones instead of the intended vaccine. Subsequent investigations and testimonies regarding the series of unexplained deaths under Jones's care led to her conviction for McLennan's murder. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison. Jones faced additional charges for attempting to kill a 4-week-old baby, Rolando Santos, by administering a lethal dose of a blood-thinning agent. Thankfully, the child survived, and Jones was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to serve an additional 60 years. Despite her lengthy sentences, Jones was scheduled for release in 2018 under Texas mandatory release law, which allows inmates to complete their sentences sooner based on good behavior. However, prosecutors were determined to prevent her release, suspecting that she may have been responsible for the deaths of up to 60 infants and children during her nursing career. They worked to gather evidence for these suspected killings, leading to new murder charges being brought against Jones. Jones was indicted for the murder of Joshua Sawyer, a child who died under mysterious circumstances while under her care at the Bexar County Hospital ICU. Additional murder charges were subsequently filed against her for the deaths of Rosemary Vega, Richard Nelson, Paul Villarreal, and Patrick Zavala, who allegedly received high doses of muscle relaxers or painkillers administered by Jones. While Jones awaits trial for these new charges, she remains in prison. A judge ruled her competent to stand trial, eliminating the possibility of early release. The motivations behind her crimes remain uncertain, but it is speculated that Jones committed these acts to gain a sense of power and importance, thrusting herself into life-and-death situations. 4. Amelia Dyer. Amelia Dyer is the fourth entry on this list. In 1896, at 57 years old, she was executed for the murder of a baby girl. She was responsible for the deaths of at least 12 infants, and some experts estimate that she may have killed as many as 400 babies. Amelia Dyer took advantage of the social and legal circumstances of Victorian Britain to commit these crimes for financial gain while evading detection. During this time, unmarried mothers faced difficult circumstances in caring for their children and earning a living, as society frowned upon single parenthood and illegitimacy. Adoption and fostering services lacked proper regulation, leading to the emergence of baby farmers. These individuals acted as agents, taking upfront fees from mothers who sought adoption or fostering services for their babies. Unfortunately, the practice was often misused, making it challenging to trace the fate of the children. In some cases, it was financially advantageous for the babies under their care not to survive. Amelia Dyer presented herself as a respectable and trustworthy caregiver for infants. She advertised adopting or nurturing babies, promising a safe and loving home. However, in reality, Dyer took the money from desperate mothers and killed many of the babies shortly after their arrival. Her preferred method was strangulation using white tape, followed by wrapping the bodies in paper packages and bags before disposing of them in rivers. Despite her frequent name and address changes, rumors about Dyer's activities began to spread in Bristol, her former hometown. She had been labeled insane twice, although at her trial, the prosecution successfully argued that it was a ploy to avoid suspicion. Nonetheless, Dyer's family and associates started growing suspicious and uneasy about her actions, and she narrowly escaped discovery on several occasions. During one investigation, a breakthrough came when a package containing the body of a baby girl named Helena Fry was found in the Thames River. Detective Constable Anderson discovered a faintly written name and address on the wrapping paper, leading them to Amelia Dyer's home in Reading. Detectives placed her under surveillance and sent a decoy to arrange a meeting, allowing them to arrest Dyer. Dyer confessed to the murders but pleaded insanity at her trial. The defense used her religious rhetoric and displays of devotion to argue that she was not fully responsible for her actions. However, the prosecution presented evidence of her devious behavior and previous acts of deception under suspicion, swaying the jury to find her guilty of murder. Amelia Dyer was sentenced to death and hanged at Newgate in June 1896 by James Billington. In the years following the Dyer case, several acts of Parliament, such as the Infant Life Protection Act and the Children's Act, were enacted to strengthen adoption and foster regulations. These acts required local authorities to be notified promptly of any changes in custody or deaths of children under the age of 7. The reforms aimed to prevent similar tragedies and ensure the welfare of children. 5. Alexandra Tobias. The fifth entry on this list is the murder of Dylan Lee Edmondson by his mother, Alexandra Tobias. The 22-year-old mother killed his son on January 19, 2010. Just a day before this bone-chilling incident, Tobias had taken an online personality test that jokingly called her bipolar and suggested she was difficult to handle. However, nobody could have anticipated the horrifying events that would unfold the next morning. While absorbed in playing games on Facebook the morning of the incident, Alexandra's baby Dylan suffered fatal head injuries.
Listen, we're gonna get help on the way, okay?
Distressed, she called paramedics when Dylan stopped breathing. Initially, she provided a false explanation, claiming that Dylan had fallen off the couch due to a dog's interference. As authorities, doctors, and Tobias's family delved deeper into the case, it became apparent that Alexandra had been deceitful and attempted to conceal the horrific truth. Despite her initial portrayal as a responsible parent and high school graduate with aspirations for college, the truth revealed a darker side. It was discovered that on that fateful day, Alexandra, absorbed in her Facebook gaming session, had tragically shaken her baby to death. The revelation shocked everyone involved, and the case was brought before Circuit Judge Adrian G. Soud.
"You shall be incarcerated for a term of 50 years.
After hearing numerous testimonies, Judge Soud delivered a sentence of 50 years in prison, highlighting the gravity of Alexandra's actions. He emphasized that she had taken the life of her vulnerable and defenseless child simply because he had interrupted her Facebook gaming session. Alexandra Tobias pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and news of her plea quickly spread, attracting attention from popular websites and TV shows. However, amid the media attention, Dylan's father, E.J. Edmondson, expressed disappointment that the focus shifted away from the tragedy towards sensational aspects of the case. During this difficult time, Edmondson learned of the immense suffering his son endured in his final hours. Alexandra claimed to be dealing with postpartum depression. Still, she expressed a desire to return to her previous self, attempting to downplay her terrible act. Friends and family described Alexandra as a cheerful individual who had faced hardships, including the loss of her mother and an alleged rape. An unexpected pregnancy disrupted her college plans, and her troubled relationship with Edmondson resulted in domestic violence arrests. Before the sentencing, evidence emerged, including case depositions and letters in Alexandra's handwriting, suggesting her attempts to normalize her time in jail through activities like coloring. It seemed she held on to the belief that she could somehow overcome the charges against her. Intercepted letters presented as evidence revealed Alexandra's admission of shaking the baby and smashing his head against her computer monitor. In a desperate attempt to evade responsibility, she also tried to shift the blame onto her boyfriend, his mother, and even her dog. These shocking revelations left those close to Alexandra in a state of disbelief. Her sister Elizabeth pleaded for mercy on her behalf, presenting pictures portraying Alexandra as a seemingly loving mother. Despite the emotional pleas, the overwhelming evidence against her could not be ignored. The case attracted further attention when investigators realized the significant role that Facebook had played in the baby's tragic death. Screen captures exposed Alexandra's frequent use of social networking sites, particularly addictive games like Farmville. Psychologist Stephen Bloomfield testified that Alexandra had taken Xanax without a prescription on the morning of the incident. This anti-anxiety medication potentially exacerbated her already volatile mood swings, considering her history of depression stemming from her upbringing with a bipolar and drug-addicted mother. 6. Daniel McKee. Daniel McKee, a 21-year-old man from Tehachapi, is the sixth person on this list who caused the death of a baby. In 2017, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for murdering his girlfriend's 4-month-old baby named Anakin McKee. Daniel McKee was found guilty of second-degree murder and assault, resulting in the death of a child under 8 years old. Anakin McKee was declared dead on February 26, 2017, at their home in Sand Canyon near Tehachapi. It's important to note that despite sharing the same last name, Daniel McKee is not the biological father of Anakin. An autopsy revealed that Anakin's death was caused by violent shaking, which caused injuries to his neck, spine, and head. During the trial, it was confirmed that these injuries were consistent with whiplash-related violence resulting from shaking. The prosecutor, David Wilson, described the incident as a deliberate and violent act, emphasizing the severe injuries inflicted on the child. Evidence presented during the trial showed that Daniel McKee had considered killing Anakin. The prosecutor referred to a Facebook post made by Daniel McKee while Anakin was in the hospital, asking if anyone knew how to kill a baby. Daniel McKee claimed that his Facebook account had been hacked and denied making the post, but this was contradicted by trial testimony. About a month after the Facebook post, Anakin McKee passed away while alone in a room with Daniel McKee for a few minutes. Initially, Daniel McKee said he woke up to find Anakin not breathing. However, during questioning by EA detectives, he later admitted to shaking and squeezing the baby. Daniel McKee confessed multiple times to detectives that he had killed him. According to the prosecutor, Daniel McKee was frustrated and stressed at the time of the baby's death. However, taking care of Anakin meant he had a responsibility to protect and care for him. The prosecutor emphasized that Daniel McKee's frustration should never have led to Anakin's death, and he could have prevented this tragedy by simply leaving the room and taking a break. During his sentencing, Daniel showed little emotion and chose not to make a statement. The judge imposed concurrent sentences of 25 years to life and 15 years to life. Daniel McKee's court-appointed lawyer declined to comment after the sentencing. Anakin's family was present in the courtroom but chose not to give a victim impact statement. They were relieved that Daniel McKee was held accountable for Anakin's death and had always sought justice for their child. 7. Susan Smith. Susan Smith is the 7th baby killer on this list. She was convicted of murdering her 2 kids. This tragic event happened in a small town in South Carolina. Susan Smith, a seemingly ordinary woman, claimed to experience a heartbreaking loss, the murder of her 2 young boys. Initially, the community was shocked that such a violent crime could occur in their midst. However, as the ordeal unfolded, the police began to uncover inconsistencies in Susan Smith's account, leading to suspicions and ultimately making her the prime suspect. After several days, Susan Smith confessed to the heinous crime she had committed, leaving the nation in disgust. Before the tragic event, Susan Smith appeared to live a normal life. The only significant incident in her past was the suicide of her father when she was 8 years old. She met her future spouse, David Smith, at 19, and they went on to have 2 children, Michael and Alex. Her friends, neighbors, and relatives regarded Susan as well-known and well-liked. No one could have anticipated that she would commit such a horrific act. On October 25th, Susan Smith claimed she was driving on Highway 49 when a man suddenly jumped into her car at a red light. She described the abductor as a black male in his late 20s to early 30s. She asserted that the man held her at gunpoint and forced her to drive. They had traveled a short distance before the man ordered her to stop in the middle of the road. Susan begged for the release of her children, who were still in the back seat, but her pleas were in vain. The town of Union mobilized thousands of volunteers to search over 500 square miles for the missing children. Despite the nationwide attention, there were no signs of the children or the alleged abductor. During the investigation, the police and prosecutors gradually uncovered inconsistencies in Susan Smith's abduction story. Several unanswered questions raised doubts about her account. There were no reported crimes in the area that night, raising concerns about the motive for an alleged suspect to flee. Moreover, Susan's description of the abductor lacked distinguishing features, rendering it unhelpful. The police enlisted the assistance of individuals like Mark Klass and Gene Boylan to aid in the investigation, but Susan refused their help. The mounting discrepancies made the police increasingly suspicious of Susan's innocence, prompting them to call her in for questioning and search her home for evidence. She failed a lie detector test, and neighbors provided information about a man she had been seeing. A letter from that man expressing his reluctance to assume responsibility for a ready-made family further fueled suspicions. Under intense questioning, Susan broke down and confessed to the crime after 9 days. She revealed the location of the bodies, and divers recovered them from John D. Long Lake. Susan Smith was subsequently arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. During the trial, the prosecution, led by prosecutor Thomas Pope, sought to convict Susan Smith to the fullest extent of the law, even requesting the death penalty at one point. However, the jury deliberated for 2.5 hours and decided against the death penalty. They deemed it inappropriate for someone they perceived as a really disturbed person. Susan's defense attorney argued that she had already suffered enough and urged the jury to show leniency, but their plea fell on deaf ears. Susan's confession resulted in a life sentence in prison, with eligibility for parole after 30 years. 8. Laura Castle. The 8th entry on this list is Laura Castle. Laura Castle, a woman from Barrow, Cumbria, was found guilty of the murder of a 13-month-old baby named Leyland James Corkill, whom she had intended to adopt. In January 2021, Laura admitted to shaking the baby boy after becoming overwhelmed by his crying. However, her husband, Scott Castle, was acquitted of causing or allowing the child's death. The trial took place at Preston Crown Court, where Laura Castle, age 38, was also found guilty of 1 count of child cruelty. Leyland James was taken into care by Cumbria County Council 2 days after his birth on December 21, 2019. He was placed with the Castles in August 2020. During the trial, evidence indicated Laura Castle's increasing frustration and resentment toward the baby. Although social services were aware that the couple had difficulty bonding with the child, there were no immediate concerns for his safety, as no visible signs of abuse were observed. However, the situation took a tragic turn on January 6, 2021, when Laura Castle called emergency services to report that Leyland James was unconscious and breathing abnormally after falling from the sofa. Leyland James was rushed to Alder Hey Children's Hospital in Liverpool, but succumbed to his injuries the following day. Medical professionals at the hospital became suspicious of Laura Castle's account of events, prompting further investigation. It was later revealed that brutal force had been used to cause fatal brain injuries, consistent with abusive head trauma or shaken baby syndrome. Pathologists identified multiple bruises and marks on Leyland James's face, head, and body, indicating a pattern of physical abuse. During the trial, Laura Castle admitted to manslaughter but claimed she did not intend to kill the child. She stated that she had lost control of her emotions due to his constant crying and shook him in an attempt to silence him. However, pathologists emphasized that the injuries sustained by Leyland James were consistent with a deliberate and forceful strike against a hard surface. Neighbors testified that they frequently heard Laura Castle shouting and what sounded like a child being slapped. The foster mother who had cared for Leyland James during the first 8 months of his life described him as a happy and content child who enjoyed playing with his toys and being held. Following a 2.5-week trial, The jury deliberated for under 3 hours before reaching their verdict. Laura Castle was found guilty of murder and child cruelty, while Scott Castle was acquitted of all charges. The council's executive director for People, John Reedman, described the case as truly shocking, expressing deep sorrow that adoption had not provided a safe and loving environment for Leyland James. The child's birth mother also expressed her devastation, stating that her son had been taken away from her to ensure his safety, only to suffer abuse at the hands of his prospective adoptive mother. Laura Castle was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. The judge described her actions as selfish and emphasized that the tragedy could have been prevented if the adoption had been terminated when it became clear that Laura Castle was struggling to bond with the child. The court recognized the gravity of her violent actions, which resulted in the loss of an innocent life. 9. Jediah Carter. The 9th baby killer on this list is Jediah Carter. He was convicted of murdering Desire Hughes. The heartbreaking incident took place in West Toledo on April 27, 2022. 7-month-old Desire Hughes lost her life when Jediah Carter fired shots at the car driven by her father, Jeremiah Hughes. 1 year later, Carter was sentenced.
Jediah Carter will spend the rest of his life in prison without parole.
That firearm didn't protect you. It turned you into a baby killer.
During the court proceedings, Judge Lindsay Navarre delivered a powerful statement, highlighting that Carter's firearm possession did not offer him protection or safety. Instead, it transformed him into a murderer who took the life of an innocent baby. According to her family, Desire was robbed of experiencing her first words, first steps, and the joy of celebrating her first birthday. The shooting stemmed from a road rage incident where Carter responded by recklessly firing shots into the car. This act was described as indiscriminate and lacking rationality. Carter's defense attorney argued that he was not a habitual troublemaker and insisted that the incident was a mistake. They emphasized that Carter did not seek trouble or engage in drive-by shootings. Following the sentencing, Desire's family expressed a mix of emotions. While they believed justice had been served, they also acknowledged that it would not bring back their beloved baby girl. Desire's aunt, Jamie Turner, spoke lovingly about the little girl, recounting moments when she displayed her energetic and sweet nature. The family was further burdened by remarks made by Toledo Mayor Wade Kapsukiewicz, who initially suggested that the shooting was connected to drugs and gangs. The family found this insinuation unfair and felt that it unjustly cast doubt on Desire's father and misrepresented the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. The aftermath of the incident was filled with challenges for the Hughes family. Instead of receiving support from the community, they found themselves facing fear and judgment. The community mistakenly believed that Desire's father's involvement in criminal activities made him a target for the shooting. Turner stressed that the incident had no connection to gangs or drugs, highlighting the importance of recognizing that such tragedies can affect anyone, regardless of their background. While the family finds solace in the sentencing and believes that justice has been served, they believe the void left by Desire's absence will never be filled. Following Carter's sentencing, a response was sought from the mayor's office regarding Kapsukiewicz's previous comments about the shooting being gang-related, but the office declined to comment. 10. Leon Matthias. The last entry on this list is Leon Matthias. Leon Matthias, a 34-year-old father from Barnsley, was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of his 9-week-old son, Hunter. The judge described the violence inflicted by Matthias as grotesque and the loss of temper as truly horrifying. On the fateful day in November 2018, Matthias violently shook his son while giving him a bath, causing severe brain injuries. Hunter was immediately taken to Barnsley Hospital in a critical condition and later transferred to Sheffield Children's Hospital, where he tragically passed away 3 days later. During the trial, it was revealed that Matthias had shown no remorse or emotion, further compounding the gravity of his actions. His lack of empathy was evident to the court, which found him guilty of murder on January 30, 2021, despite his denial of shaking his son. Medical examinations confirmed that Hunter suffered severe brain and eye injuries, scalp bruising, and leg fractures. The sentencing took place at Sheffield Crown Court, where Mrs. Justice Lambert handed down a minimum sentence of 16 years in prison. She emphasized the difficulty in comprehending Matthias's actions and the horrifying breach of trust between a parent and a child. The judge expressed concern that Matthias had prioritized himself over his son's life, even as medical professionals fought to save Hunter. Family members present in the courtroom reacted emotionally to the sentence, proclaiming Matthias's innocence and their unwavering support for him. However, the evidence presented during the trial, including a distressing 999 call, made it clear that Matthias had acted violently. Toward towards his son and had made no immediate effort to aid him. In his defense, Matthias's barrister, Peter Griffiths, KC, argued that the incident was completely out of character for his client and lasted only seconds. He highlighted the harrowing 999 call, which demonstrated Matthias's initial attempts to assist his son. Mr. Griffiths requested a significantly lower minimum term than the suggested 15 years in the sentencing guidelines. Mrs. Justice Lambert acknowledged that Matthias had not intended to kill his son and had acted out of frustration and irritation. However, she noted that he had failed to be truthful about the events leading to Hunter's injuries, displaying a self-centered attitude even in the face of his son's critical condition. The judge concluded that Matthias had breached the precious relationship of trust between a parent and child, causing irrevocable harm due to his actions. Leon Matthias was a liar and a baby killer, and no one will argue he and other baby killers on this list got what they deserved in court. If you enjoyed this video, click on the card showing on your screen right now for more videos exposing heinous crimes.